In the late 80s and early 90s, the term role-playing game, or RPG, immediately conjured images of dungeons, dragons, demons, and wizards to most gamers. Games like Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy helped to establish the genre with epic stories of a group of heroes in a medieval setting, battling monsters and wielding swords, staffs, and magic. There was little room, it seemed, for a more contemporary approach to storytelling in gaming. That is, until a certain Japanese copywriter and celebrity, Shigesato Itoi, pitched the idea to Mario main man Shigeru Miyamoto, who initially showed skepticism about Itoi's ability to develop a video game. Itoi would reduce his other commitments, and a team would be assembled by Nintendo, who would eventually become Ape, with Itoi at the helm. Itoi would go on to write the entire script for the game, commuting from Tokyo to Ichikawa, dedicating countless hours to the project. With the support of Miyamoto and then president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, Mr. Itoi's ideas would eventually materialize, and be released in 1989 on the NES as Mother. Mother was a smash hit in Japan. The game's title was chosen by Itoi as he felt that Mother was noticeably more feminine than most RPGs. The game featured a young boy, Ninten, as the protagonist in a contemporary setting. The game mixes Americana, pop culture references, and science fiction, replacing traditional JRPG elements such as swords, daggers, and lances with baseball bats, frying pans, and stun guns. As opposed to things like goblins and dragons, enemies include possessed animals like dogs and crows, townspeople, and even inanimate objects like lamps and cars. Magic is replaced with psychic powers, or PSI, and although these elements made the game vastly different from other JRPGs of the time, the core turn-based battle elements are there, which make the game play like an RPG, if not necessarily having the right aesthetic. The soundtrack was handled by Keiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka. Suzuki, a veteran composer for various Japanese rock groups, and Tanaka, who composed the soundtracks for games like Kid Icarus, Metroid, and Super Mario Land, worked to create a varied palette that ranges from the bouncy, small-town feel of Pollyanna or Bein' Friends, to the ethereal whimsy of Magicant, and the upbeat frenzy of the various battle themes. Indeed, even the plot of the game itself revolves around collecting 8 melodies, and key moments of the story involve the characters singing or dancing. There was even a soundtrack released for the game, featuring lyrics to several tunes from the game with English vocalists. Although the rather grindy and difficult nature of the game has not aged particularly well, Mother's unconventional story and quirky, humorous writing sets it apart from other RPGs of the NES era. The game is chock full of funny dialogue, and even creepy scenes and emotional moments. Itoi's dogged commitment to creating something truly unique shines through the game, and while yes, it certainly has its frustrating moments, okay, there's a lot of them, such as the huge areas with overly abundant random encounters, the limited inventory system, and the sometimes brutally difficult bosses, the story is, nonetheless, genuinely rewarding. Particularly that fantastic, cosmic ending on Mount Itoi. Yes, Mount Itoi. That leads into the next game. Mother almost made it to the West under the title EarthBound. A localization team, led by Phil Sandhop, fully translated the game, removing certain suggestive content and even adding a run button. However, the team's efforts would be in vain, as Nintendo pulled the plug on the release at the last minute. Sandhop would later reflect on the cancellation. Once the Super NES squatted in the pipeline and shoved the game aside from its appointed time, I believe that the marketing execs just decided that the game would be too expensive to produce and unsuccessful without marketing, and that's why it fell into oblivion. The English translation would resurface several years later, however, when a beta cartridge was found on eBay in 1998 by a translation group called Demiforce. Demiforce would organize an effort to have the game dumped and released, and raised money to pay the cartridge owner, a collector named Kenny Brooks, to utilize the beta cartridge. After a few programming modifications to fix some bugs and retitling the game EarthBound Zero to differentiate it from its Super NES sequel, the game was released online and for many years was the only playable English language version of the game. Mother would eventually see an official release over 25 years later on the Wii U as EarthBound Beginnings. This version of the game is the same translated ROM as EarthBound Zero, only retitled. Following the success of the original Mother, Itoi endeavored to create a sequel for the Super Nintendo. The development would not be easy, however, and the project would ultimately take 5 years to complete, as the team were plagued with programming issues. Fortunately, programming whiz and veteran developer Satoru Iwata, then president of HAL Laboratories and future CEO of Nintendo, would step in, reprogramming the game from scratch and effectively saving it from development hell. Itoi would later say of Iwata, "We had Iwata take a look at our work, and he said, if we use what you've got now, it'll take you 2 years to fix. If we start from scratch, we can get this done in 6 months." Iwata was wonderful at splitting up work and finding ways to make efficient progress, so we had more people actively working on different sections at any one moment. It's like everyone had been using a manual shovel to dig a hole, and then Iwata came and said, "I built a jackhammer for each of you. Please use them." Mother 2 would release in 1994 in Japan, and would become another big hit, lauded by critics and selling phenomenally well. Unlike its predecessor, but borrowing the original English title planned for it, Mother 2 was fully translated and released a year later as EarthBound in North America. Nintendo had high hopes for the game, and even invested heavily in advertising, including a commercial and other promotional material in Nintendo Power, with stuff like scratch and sniff stickers. However, whether it was due to the bizarre advertising tagline, "This game stinks," the high price tag of the game, which included a full strategy guide, or the quirky graphics, the game, needless to say, bombed. On EarthBound's commercial failure in America, Shigeru Miyamoto would say, "We had high hopes for EarthBound, the Super NES version in the US, but it didn't do well. We even had a TV commercial thinking, hey, this thing could sell 3 million copies. But it didn't." EarthBound took the elements that made the original Mother such a unique game and dialed it up to 11. The quirky dialogue and humor that embodies Itoi's personality are immediately present from the beginning of the game, and the overall plot and scenarios of the game can get quite bizarre at times. EarthBound has a distinct feel that separates it from other games of the era by leaps and bounds. Whether it's the varying landscapes, such as the small-town vibes of Anna and Tucson, creepy moments such as the zombie-infested Threed, or the swampy jungle of the Deep Darkness, the game's varied world is both charming and, at times, even dark and disturbing. The game follows the protagonist, Ness, who, after witnessing a meteorite crash land in his hometown of Onnet, seeks out 2 other boys, Jeff and Pooh, and a girl, Paula, and travels around Eagleland seeking the 8 Your Sanctuary locations, recording the melodies of each location in a soundstone. With its memorable characters and narrative theme of wisdom, courage, and friendship, the game's plot is a rich buffet of engaging and emotional storytelling, and characters that have a lasting impact on the player. Similar to the original premise from Mother, the game's plot revolves around this idea of collecting melodies. Music was hugely influential on Itoi, and there's even several direct references to artists such as David Bowie, The Who, and especially the Beatles throughout the game. Indeed, even the title Mother is a reference to the song by John Lennon. The game is chock full of other pop culture references as well, such as the title screen, the war against Gygas, being a nod to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, the Runaway Five being a spoof of the Blues Brothers, and the zany alien creatures, the Mr. Saturn, being inspired by the Tralfamadorians, an alien race featured in author Kurt Vonnegut's novels. EarthBound's plot is a rich feast of great storytelling. It's very much a game about friendship, love, and growing up, with lots of humor, emotion, and some truly cosmic and dark moments, embodying some of the best elements of science fiction and cosmic horror. The end confrontation with Gygas is perhaps one of the most disturbing final boss fights in any video game. Itoi later explained that the inspiration for the final boss stemmed from a traumatic experience he had as a child, when he walked into the wrong movie theater and witnessed what he described as a graphic rape scene from the film The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty. EarthBound's gameplay was a decided improvement from the original Mother. The overall difficulty is more balanced, as well as the leveling up system. Like the first Mother, the game utilizes a turn-based battle system, with PSI as the placeholder for magic. One unique feature of the battle system was the countdown HP system. When attacked, the character's HP slowly decreases, as opposed to the damage immediately being subtracted from the player's HP. This adds a certain frenziness to battles, especially later on in the game and during boss fights, allowing the player to quickly navigate the battle menu and heal the party before someone kicks the bucket. Each of the 4 main characters have their strengths and weaknesses, with Ness ultimately being the most well-rounded and powerful of the 4. Paula is the most adept PSI user, however, and utilizes powerful PSI attacks at the cost of low defense and HP. She can also utilize a Prey ability, which results in random attacks or healing to occur in battle, a key ability later in the game. Jeff is the only party member who cannot use PSI, but makes up for it with the ability to fix broken objects into powerful weapons and items. Pooh, the Crown Prince, learns the strongest PSI attack, the PSI Starstorm, and has powerful physical attacks and one of the most powerful weapons in the game, the elusive Sword of Kings. There's so much more that can be said about EarthBound. From the diverse and memorable cast of characters to the strange enemies and bosses and the often ethereal and surrealistic scenes and locations the game can take you to, like the zany inverted moonside where no means yes and yes means no, and the dreamlike Magickin, the realm of Ness's mind. EarthBound was truly a one-of-a-kind game with a rich and diverse story. Despite EarthBound's lack of success in the West, the game slowly garnered a vocal cult following in the late 90s, resulting in fan sites such as Starman.net and EarthBound Central, helping to bring attention to the series, as well as Ness's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. For the N64. Indeed, the fan community would continuously grow throughout the years, and EarthBound, as well as the other two games in the series, would eventually receive the due attention that it deserved in the West. A third game, Mother 3, or EarthBound 2, was planned during the development of EarthBound, with a reference to it even included in the game. Originally planned for the Super Nintendo, it was moved to the Nintendo 64 DD, and then to the N64. EarthBound 64, as it would later be titled, would be officially unveiled at Space World 1996 and received a very positive reception. Additionally, various magazines would also cover the game, including Nintendo Power. However, development for the game dragged on for a total of 6 years before ultimately being cancelled in 2000. One reason cited was the difficulty the development team faced transitioning to 3D rendered graphics, as well as the team's overambition to make the game much bigger than what was technically possible at the time. On the development of EarthBound 64, Satoru Iwata would later say, "Any normal project has a trial period where you make a sample product and get the green light based on the response. But Mother 3 was special in that we skipped the trial period and went straight to game production. Without that trial period, all we had was our experience and achievements from making Mother 2, without the benefit of starting off with a team of people who worked on Mother 2. Despite EarthBound 64's cancellation, Mother 3 would be officially announced in 2003 as being developed for the Game Boy Advance during a Japanese commercial for a Mother 1 and 2 collection for the Game Boy Advance. Mother 3 would be developed by Brownie Brown, with Itoi overseeing the project as well as writing the script, which was largely the same as the intended story for EarthBound 64. Although the game was technically downsized from EarthBound 64, Mother 3 was still rich in storytelling, world building, and remains one of the best looking games for the Game Boy Advance. The game mechanics are largely the same as EarthBound, with some improvements. A run button was added, which also allowed the player to charge into objects or enemies, and a new rhythm bashing mechanic was added to battles, which would do consecutive damage based on timing button presses to the beat of the battle music. This was a cool little feature that added an additional challenge to the actual battle mechanics. Other little changes were added, such as characters feeling feverish before learning a new PSI ability, and talking to frogs, rather than the traditional phone call to dad, were used to save the game. Due to the unavailability of the previous two game composers, Kiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka, Shogo Sakai, who at that time had composed music for Super Smash Bros. Melee, was chosen to handle the soundtrack. Mother 3's soundtrack is huge, with varied styles such as classical, jazz, rock, and even, like the first two games, includes pop culture nods as well as references to the first two Mother games. Mother 3's seminal love theme was one of the last pieces composed, and was a result of Itoi desiring a simple tune to carry a very emotional scene from the game that could be played on a piano with one finger. Sakai composed the piece so quickly that Itoi later claimed that the composer had been waiting for the order to make a song like it. The heart of Mother 3, however, is in its unmatched storytelling, personality, and emotion. If the themes of Mother 1 and 2 were of friendship, wisdom, and courage, Mother 3's themes were even more rooted in fundamental human experiences of family, loss, grief, growing up, and of course, Itoi's unique and quirky humor threading it all together. Indeed, Mother 3 has several really heavy emotional moments that leave a big impact and really stick with you. These are of course balanced out with funny dialogue and, well, some just plain weird stuff. Even simple one-liners from some of the NPCs can leave a lasting impression. The game largely follows the nuclear family of Flint, Hinawa, their children Lucas and Klaus, dog Boney, and life in their small village of Tasmilli. The game really fleshes out the small town characters in the beginning, and eventually branches out into different areas, as the story progresses and changes start happening to the town. This focus on one location for a big chunk of the game is in stark contrast to the usual JRPG trope of going from town to town, something which Itoi was adamant about. Along with pop culture references prevalent like in the previous two games, social commentary is a big theme in Mother 3. This is even foreshadowed from the very start of the game with the logo, which is both organic and metallic, hinting at the nature versus technology themes prevalent, as well as in reference to the chimeras. The small town of Tasmilli is drastically altered by the Pig Masks, a mysterious group that unleashes technological horrors on the land. Over time, Tasmilli Village and the Noire Islands as a whole transforms from an idyllic society with close-knit community, no currency, and living in balance with nature, to technology and greed taking over, and vastly transforming the native creatures and the inhabitants' very way of life. Inclusion was also a big focus in the game, with characters like the Mad Gypsies, who were purposely made androgynous, as Itoi wanted to balance out what he perceived as the more masculine themes of the game. Additionally, one of the main characters, Duster, is handicapped, something Itoi later explained, "I figured that because there are handicapped people in our world, they would also be a part of the world of Mother 3. After all, there's no way that any two people have the same physique or even the same personality. Just like with the Mad Gypsies, I included Duster so we could have someone with bad breath, a disabled leg, and living as a thief. The Mother 3 world is all about having friends like him. Perhaps you could call them symbols of not rejecting such people." There's so much more to be said about the world of Mother 3, but don't take my word for it. Stop watching this video and go play it now. It's a masterpiece. Mother 3 was released in 2006 in Japan, and to this day, still has yet to see an official Western release, despite over a decade of fans clamoring for it. Many requests have been made to Nintendo, including a petition from Starmen.net in 2003 that received over 30,000 signatures. The demand for Mother 3 in America has even been acknowledged by Nintendo of America themselves, particularly by former CEO Reggie Fils-Aimé, who has joked about it publicly on several occasions.
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3!
How about this instead?
Despite the loud outcry by fans to see an official English release, the game still remains unreleased outside of Japan in 2023. However, all hope was not lost for English-speaking fans to experience the world of Mother 3. An unofficial translation of the game was started by Starmen.net in 2006, with Japanese translator Clyde Tomato Mandolin spearheading the project. Despite the team comprising of only about a dozen people, and Nintendo's strict copyright policies hovering over their heads, a full English translation patch would be released by Starmen.net 2 years after the official Japanese release. The translation was downloaded over 100,000 times in the first week, far surpassing the team's expectations. The Mother 3 translation is perhaps the single greatest example of the amount of dedication and love the fanbase has for the series. EarthBound and the Mother series as a whole has had a history as weird and as unconventional as the games themselves. From its humble origins as a passion project by a man with no background in game development, but a vision and drive to create something truly unique, to its ups and downs both commercially and throughout its many developmental challenges, and of course to the dedicated fan base who have, throughout the years, showed so much passion and love to the series, like a reflection of the themes of the games themselves. Some even going on to recapture the spirit of those games with their own work. The Mother series is truly a unique trilogy of games that has left a lasting mark on the gaming world and to everyone's lives who have been impacted by its quirky, fun, and deeply memorable charm.
僕がみんながプレイをしてくれたことで自分の人生を変えられたっていう気がしてます。ひょっとしたら僕は世の中からいなくなってもまだ誰かはマザーのシリーズをやってると思うと、なんだかちょっと気持ち悪くてとてもなんかちょっと嬉しいです。
Thanks everyone for watching this video, I really appreciate it. The Mother series is a trilogy of games very near and dear to my heart, and this is a video that touches on some personal emotions for me, as I've been a fan of these games since I first played EarthBound in the mid-90s. What started out as a simple review of EarthBound turned into a full-blown retrospective of the series, and I've enjoyed every minute of research and production that this video has required of my time. If you somehow haven't played this series yet, I highly suggest starting with EarthBound on the Virtual Console. If you like that, play Beginnings, or if you are able, Mother 3. Each game offers its own unique experience, while still feeling like part of the same world, or indeed the same man's brain, of course, Mystery Toy. I purposely left out any major spoilers from any of the games, aside from touching on the final battle in EarthBound, so that newcomers to the series could enjoy the game themselves for the very first time. Either way, whether you're a veteran fan like myself or a newcomer, I really appreciate the support in watching this video and encourage you to check out some of my other brief history videos, which I'll have linked at the end here. Also, I'd really appreciate checking out our friendly neighborhood Discord if you're interested in this channel and want to get a little deeper into it. Since this is the Mother series, in lieu of my usual farewell, saying peace and all that, I'll leave you all with a warm, friendly Okidiska? Boing!